online.
Okay,
And-
all right.
We are now live.
And
Okay.
is it in an email that you just sent, Jane, or yesterday, or where is it?
Chrissy sent it a little bit ago.
I sent it. We're just so you know, we're all live. And
Yes, and
sent it
I'm
at
going to,
9:07.
okay. So this is Senate Appropriations, and I apologize for starting a bit late. It's my fault. I was responding to an email, and time got away. So, and we're also trying to organize our documents so that we can get through them as quickly as possible. All members of the committee should have the documents. We're going to start with number 1, which is base changes, what the Senate Appropriations Committee has talked about relative to the House. So I'm going to have Stephanie pull that up, and we're going to run through it. I hope you will find that it's reflective of our discussions.
Okay.
So you all
So
set?
Do you want to put it up on the screen? Chrissy will post it on our committee webpage. So people watching can get it. Or do you want me to, does everyone have it in front of them and we can keep faces up and walk through it? What's the preference of the committee?
If everybody has it on another device, I would like to just be able to see people's face.
Okay.
Yep.
So if
Does everyone have it?
Yes.
I printed it out.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So it's the document that says SAC base changes compared to the House. And it's about a page and a half long because there's not a tremendous number of changes that you're making to the base appropriations compared to the House. And so the first item on there is in B section, it's section B 108, which is the human resource section, where the House had stripped out $125,000 to do phase 1 of the classification system modernization. And so your decision was to add back that $125,000.
That work is a priority for us, and we heard from from GovOps, and they support it. And so we're supporting our own initiative and putting the money back in. Okay. The next
the next group of 5 items, B125 through B128, and then D101 on this document. These are all legislative related pieces. And so they're the 4 positions that we talked about. They're being funded now in the base of the budget, but they're net neutral in terms of the general fund FY22 impact, because we're also reverting the same amount of dollars in total in D101 from legislative appropriations. So it's lodging the money in each department, but also taking money back that's available on a one-time basis from various departments in the legislature.
Yep.
So that's
Okay.
what's happening in that group.
Senator Sears, I wish we're going to come back. Well, I want to go back and wait, and let's go down to the next section on Medicaid state only. Oh, there's Senator Sears. All right.
Okay.
So the next 2 are making an adjustment. The House put nearly $1 million in the Defender General's base budget. Senator, we've had some discussion about that. If you look at the appropriations, the Defender General's appropriation is now larger than the state's attorney's budget. And so this is trying to balance out competing needs within that judicial environment. So Senator Sears, this is to move the $75,000 out of the 2 Defender General contracts so that they're available to be moved to other places in that judicial system.
Right,
Okay.
that's my recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's reflected of making an adjustment rather than all the base going into the Defender General as opposed to other parts of
Yeah, I
the
mean,
system.
He got over $1 million increase from the House in on his base.
Yeah.
It's a
So
little less than $1 million, just a smidge less than $1 million. Yep.
Smidge less, okay.
all right. So that's our recommendation. Senator Sears has given it a lot of attention. And then we're going to move down to judiciary, because part of the pressure here, Senator Sears has talked about, and we took the testimony, and that's 2 places within judiciary, our courts, that were really significantly impacted, and they requested help with those costs. One was around the fee loss of revenues, which was, I think, 300,000, and the labor relations decision that was
Right.
the remainder.
Right. They've had, they had a labor relations board claim, and they've got decisions made where they have to provide increases, and the governors and the House have not been responsive to the judiciary need for additional funds on their base.
So it's the recommendation from our Judiciary Committee that we recognize the fact that we've got $750,000 hole in either lost revenues or costs as a result of the Labor Board decision that cannot go unaddressed to support the administration of the courts. So that's another part of this proposal. The next is on state's attorneys, and that is, again, recalibrating or helping to address the fact
That's
that they've got base fees.
That's 5 vacant deputy state's attorney positions around the state. One in Windsor County, and I think Washington, one in the Kingdom, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So maybe one in Addison County. Anyway, they've had 5 they've been carrying for quite a while. So this would build the base of those positions. We were requested much more than those positions, but the Judiciary Committee, I think, would agree that filling those was important.
We're the top priority. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next one is something that Senator Sears has talked about, and we're finally acting on it, and is really moving away from the old model of state paid deputies to a different model. And if you want to talk to us about that, Senator Sears.
Well, it isn't all that complicated. We've been noticing over the years a decrease in the number of state paid deputies for transport and use of them. As video arraignments became more and more used during the pandemic, I think it's going to continue to be used. Transports won't be as necessary. I spent a lot of time this summer speaking with Sheriff Marcoux in Orange County and Sheriff Andrews in Windham County.
Marcoux from Lamoille.
Where did I put him?
Wyndham.
Orange.
Okay,
Orange. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for reminding me where
I
he's
just
from.
wanted to make sure you understood that.
Your sheriff and Senator Ballant sheriff. And the conclusion is that it shouldn't be any different than the other agencies who need transport. And one of the problems we found with DCF and the assault on a social worker was we had young people being picked up and either left in police stations because they couldn't get transport, or left in motels with social workers watching them because they couldn't get transports. So we're hopeful that the sheriff in Windham County is working with DCF on a statewide contract. There's been some discussion about who provides transport. We also have whistleblower complaints in 2 counties regarding the use of state paid deputies and how the sheriffs are using them. We had hoped to have a report from the auditor before then, but if you remember at H315, we put in money to make sure to have a contract to make sure that that's covered. This isn't going to be popular with your sheriff, right? I know it's not going to be popular with mine, but I just don't think you can justify spending over $2 million on 25 state paid deputies when the times are changing. So this is my recommendation. I won't put it on the rest of the committee. I'm responsible for it, but obviously you have to still have some deputies to transport, and so some of this money would go to the to the judiciary to cover the cost of the transports. Other portions of the money saved would go to other areas of it within the justice system, including the state's attorneys. I think it starts, I believe, Stephanie, the language would begin the transfer on October 1st, not on July 1st.
That's, the dollars reflected here are October 1st, and when we get to the language part of the document, you will see that in the effective dates and what Damien drafted for this, this change.
Yeah, I can tell you again, I mean, it won't, a lot of things we do here that may not be popular, and I'm sure that sheriffs will be upset by it, but
it sounds like it's going to be more efficient and be cheaper, and somebody's going to be in charge. 2 people, not a zoo.
Well,
Part
I
of
think
the-
it's reflective also of changing practices. I think that's the other thing. And so this is more where the courts can manage it and as needed, as opposed to an ongoing amount of money, regardless of how the need is experienced. So, but I think
Well, there's-
Senator Sears is being honest about it. When you start redistributing or changing what you reimburse for, you always get pushback.
I want to mention one other thing that has been a long complaint of the sheriffs, and that is when they send their 2 transport deputies, for example, from South Burlington down to Brattleboro, they will end up staying there and waiting for the case to be brought. They get there at 9 a.m. to make sure. They get up early in the morning, drive up to South Burlington, for example, get down to Brattleboro at 9 a.m. for the court, and then they won't get called until 11 or 12 because the first ones called are the people that have lawyers on arraignment day. So when they actually transport people, those deputies are waiting around. I think if the judiciary is paying them for them, they're going to be less likely to have the deputies hanging around while they're paying an hourly rate for them, for 2 deputies to watch one individual who's awaiting a arraignment hearing. That's when they do transport for arraignment. Most of the arraignments now are online.
Senator Nitka.
Does this or doesn't it include state deputies who are called to a hospital to take somebody to a mental health facility?
No, that's totally different because
Okay,
unfortunately, the state has developed 3 or 4 different rates for transport. One is for the mentally ill or alleged mental illness to go to the state hospital. One is for DCF. One is for BGS. And then your state paid deputies for court hearings. I mean, it's a system that is.
It's been a bit ad hoc.
So when somebody calls for a transport of a person who may be mentally ill, the deputies are not the state paid deputies. The state paid deputies do the court. Now they may be the same person,
right.
by the way. You know, they're not acting as the state paid deputy.
And of course, with the proposal that came in with from DCF, in addition to that, they're also
Yep.
paying deputies for security at
Right.
the temporary housing site. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
money going out in a variety of different ways. So unless there are further questions on this, you can see how changing this method of reimbursement is allowing investments. It's being still within that criminal justice framework. It's just how it's going out. It's not being used to fund, a totally unrelated area of spending. And that gets us down to, as was mentioned, the judiciary. The money would move to the judiciary to be managed. That's the 1.37 based on October 1 implementation. And then the next line, Senator Sears, was another area that you felt needed to be addressed to the network.
The network programs haven't had an increase since 2008. Part of the reason is that they're funded through grants through the Center for Crime Victim Services, and then the well, they're funded through a lot of ways, but part of their funding is through the Center for Primary Services. And they, this is $150,000 to try to help with the 15 centers around the state.
Well, if it's been since '08 and they haven't had any increases, it's way overdue.
I should check that date. It may be 2018. I think I might have just added a decade.
No, that's fine.
So those are my recommendations, or the Senate Judiciary Committee spent a lot of time. When we get to the one-time use, you'll see a lot of other recommendations. Like the Senator Baruth and Senator Nick, other than the sheriff's thing, and I'll take full responsibility for that, we're involved in the rest of the discussions.
Right. I think Senator Sears this is not new. He's been talking about the need to do this throughout the committee discussion, and this is putting it in place. Yeah, Senator Baruth.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear I support Dick on that, on the deputies.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm reading that everybody is feeling that in light of the changed world, okay, that this reallocation within that justice-related framework is acceptable. Okay, I'm going to move on to the 300 section then.
Okay, so the next group of items on this sheet are mostly related to other bills. So we are moving the Dr. Dinosaur-like expansion that we talked about on Friday or Thursday, I can't remember which day now, into the budget. And the House had it running in the Dr. Dinosaur bill. So that's what you see on their net neutral transaction. We're just adding it into the state only because it's actually not Medicaid matched. It's a Medicaid-like program. And we have other programs in that state only bucket under DEVA. On the child care bill, 318 and H171, we're pulling all the money. The House decided to have the money run in the bill. We're pulling the money back into the budget. We're putting the $5.5 million rate increase into the Child Development Division, the CDD. And then we're also, and I just got the actual number for the 50% of the ARPA Child Care Stabilization Grant. We're appropriating, we talked about this on Friday as well, appropriating 50% of the ARPA child care because that has to be obligated by December. So we're putting that appropriation in, and we'll see language when we get to the language section. And the workforce piece is going into that appropriation. So that's what you see in those transactions there, that we're adding the rate increase to the base, and we're adding the one-time ARPA funding, and we're taking it out of the child care bill. And you will also see the child care study when we get to the one-time section of the general fund. So that's the child care piece. And then the Senate Health and Welfare Committee had requested the increase in reach up benefits to bring us up to the 2021
Standard of need,
same rateable reduction. And that comes with a $2.77 million cost increase in the base. And so that's what's being added in the reach up section.
okay. Senator Westman, did you have your hand up? This is what we talked about. The House Child Care Bill used base funding for that training, but there is millions of dollars coming in under the child care specific bucket of ARPA, and that's what we're using, and that will allow us to fund an increase to the reach up benefit. And that's the one that right now is about $740 a month for a mother to support and meet the basic needs of, say, 2 children. So the two go together. It's using that additional federal resource to underwrite the training, and that allows us. So you're muted, Senator Westman.
I totally get that. It was the childcare pieces when she gets through that. I couldn't track exactly what where you were getting the resources in that.
Okay, well, that's
because
where,
as you mentioned, the workforce training pieces in childcare, I only have a small change that I want to make, and I had passed that along to you, and I'm
And you
not,
will find that that's
and you-
reflected in the language.
Yep.
You will see it allocated in the language, I think,
Yeah.
when we
Okay.
get there.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just wanted to make,
Right now, we're
I
just
just
focusing
wanted
on
to
the
make
base
sure.
pieces. Yeah, you'll see it in the one-time section and the base pieces.
Yep.
And then the last piece in this grouping is $200,000 back into the OEO base for the micro business program that got taken out a few years ago. So there, you also see one-time money for the grants, but this is restoring into the base, the micro business program.
Okay.
So that's that group of human service pieces. Now, the next group, which actually it trips onto the next page of the document, these are all related to the moving from 2% to 3%. In the House had provided a 2% increase for mental health, IDDS services, and long-term home and community-based long-term care services. And so what this shows is the increase from the incremental increase from 2% to 3%. And you can see we have to do all the actual general fund and federal funds in B301. There's an offset portion to that because of that 10% home and community-based bump. So it's not terribly expensive to do. That's what you see it also in B301. But then you see the actual value of that 1% in sections B307 through B334.1 for the most part. And then B330 and the technical fixes that are on the top of the next page, those that was my fault in the House. I didn't quite pick up from the right sheet when we were putting this into the House document, but into the House numbers. But we needed to make a few technical fixes around the funding for this now 3% increase in these line items. And so this block, including the two on the top of the next page, are all related to that 2% to 3% change for a rate increase for those home and community-based mental health IDDS pieces. I do have you supporting no change to the underlying House position where we had to fund also the increase in the home care contract. Those pieces are still, these are only incremental changes compared to the House. So.
And
Yes, Bobby.
yeah, does this include 3% increases for all the designated agencies?
Yes.
Yes.
So like VNA as well as
Well,
human. ser-
VNA is in the
Long-
choices for care, long-term care. So we've
Right.
got two buckets here. One is our mental health and our designated agencies and our specialized service agencies. Because some DAs don't do the IDDS, that's the intellectual developmental disability population. So that's in one bucket. Then the choices for care would include the VNAs. It would include the services to keep people in their homes and not require nursing care.
But it's all at 3%, right?
Right. The House had
Yep.
two. It's under Sears.
Now, I want to just say I've been using the services of Vermont, the DNAs, and they're terrific. And
Oh, yeah,
I'm hopeful we can do the 3% for them. And hopefully,
yeah.
Okay.
I've been
Looks
doubly
good.
impressed with the work they do.
Mhm. And I think
Of course, we're a private pay, so we're not affected by the 3%. I understand.
no, but you can speak very directly to the importance of this service in
Yeah.
keeping people in homes. So, but Stephanie, we're able to do both the reach up and the 3% then with the general fund that we were able to free up. Is that correct?
Well, we'll see a bottom line here impact when we get to the bottom. So
Okay,
we're not net neutral to the House.
no, I know that.
No,
Okay.
that's
spending
fine.
more than the House.
A little bit
We
in the
are,
base.
but not a whole lot more, and for very, I think, reflective of our discussion. So let's, other questions on that? Now that we've clarified the 3%, we're doing both choices for care and for DAs and SSAs. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay.
And that
Um,
should be on the second page now. And now we have a group of just other miscellaneous pieces that are going to change in the base when you see the base numbers of the bill. The first one we talked about is actually doing the ESSER money for the Community High School of Vermont, but only for 1 year. This is still not it's not still something that the Agency of Ed supports, but your alternative would then be to try and find it in the general fund.
Quick question on that.
Mhm.
Stephanie, Senate Ed had AOE in to talk about ESSER funds, and there was a dispute between the agency and the committee over whether the agency had essentially veto power over those funds. In other words, that the legislature could not spend it without their consent. Is this implicated in that disagreement?
It is. Steve just turned on, and I'm going to let him speak to that tussle a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, the ESSER money, this is quite a disagreement. The ESSER money in this bill is ESSER 2. The disagreement is primarily on ESSER 3, but overall, it is a fairly major dispute. The Constitution says the legislature has the power to appropriate money that's in the Treasury. In H315, you gave the legislature the authority over the ESSER 3 money that it would be appropriated, and that law has become law. So the guidance from the feds talks more about they should develop a plan that the money is to be used for. It's we're meeting with Ledge Council today, and I don't think we don't agree with the agency. I'm hoping it all works out and they realize that everybody's got the same interest of Vermonters at stake and at heart. And they're really, I'm not sure quite why they're making a big issue of this, but it's hopefully it'll be resolved. But and I'll wait for Ledge Council to take it, but our thinking is you still go forward and appropriate it. And if they want to say they want to ignore legislative appropriations, that's a pretty big deal.
We might have to put some notwithstanding language in.
Well, that won't matter because they feel that they're not subject to appropriation. So,
Oh, no.
Well,
they've
then,
already done their notwithstanding. I'm going to keep going on that. Obviously, there's more discussion on that, but for now, this is not ESSER 3. This is ESSER 2, and
Yeah.
it's for 1 year. And probably there'll be more discussion. The House did 2 years with ESSER funding, so we've scaled it back. Okay, let's flexible pathways. That was
Flexible
simply
pathways in VSAC, yeah. We just moved the actual stipend out of the Agency of Education and directly appropriated it to VSAC. So that's, you see across those, they're just net neutral, but it's just.
and that was
from one place to
requested
another.
because we had this 2-step cumbersome process. So it doesn't
Yeah.
change anything. It just makes it a little administratively faster, easier.
And then the next 505, B505, the adjusted ed payment. That's a direct, technical adjustment from AOE and vetted by Mark Peralt in our office, based on where budgets are looking like they're headed right now. So that's a significant, this is the line item out of the education fund that's well over $1 billion. So percentage wise, it's not as enormous as it looks, but it's part of what's driving the position in the education fund balance sheet. And then if the chair would like to speak to the next
Okay.
item.
Well, 515 is something that we've talked about. And that is from the time it was put in place, we have never addressed the cost of retired teachers' health care. It was paid for out of the corpus of the pension fund. But then a couple of years ago, because that just contributed and compounded the underfunding, we started funding it separately. But we've never, ever addressed the issue of how the cost of the cost, we call it the normal cost of what will be a benefit that teachers who are currently employed will receive when they retire. It's their healthcare benefit. So this is a very significant piece of addressing sort of that pension OPEB situation by saying for teachers who are currently working now, just like their pensions, those costs are education expenditures, and they will be funded out of the ed fund. Now, do remember that we did change the funding into the ed fund, and all of our state's sales tax goes into the ed fund. And there's, as we look at it, that's significant movement of money from the general fund to the ed fund, where there's a potential for further growth. So this is saying for current employees, this is how that cost would be funded. It deals with the fact that we're having a future obligation that has not been specifically addressed. This does not at all deal with underfunding or anything. This is just the annual cost of that benefit for our currently employed teachers. And I think the consensus of the committee was, just like the pensions, the argument is exactly the same, that this is an expenditure that should be funded out of the ed fund.
Yep.
So that's what we are doing there, and we've calculated, I thought it was around 14, and it's coming in at 13.8. And so we will have language that goes with that to deal with that. That I will tell you that from the liability perspective and dealing with this is a very significant positive step forward to dealing with that really unrecognized expenditure that by default is coming in right now by to the general fund. So this is, we'll see further language, but I think we're all set on this. Senator Sears.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this isn't part of the ARPA 150 million that the House set aside.
No.
I agree with the governor on that one.
No, this is basically saying, just like you're having to make the contribution as the employer for teachers who are working right now, it's both, you're going to fund both their pension costs and their retired healthcare costs.
I'm fine with that.
It's basically saying this is an education expenditure, the same as any other salaries or other benefits. And that's where this expenditure should be, where the funding should come from. So no, it has nothing to do with the 150.
It's similar to what we do now for the state employees retirement. Some of it comes out of the transportation fund, some of it comes out of other funds that people are paid by.
Yeah, it's just, in this case, we never really, it's
Right.
kind of been an orphan. We've dealt with it by default.
Yep.
So this is setting up the system to recognize that there's a future cost and obligation for our current teachers, and that we need to recognize it and we need to start paying for it. Okay, Connecticut River watershed. Last fall, I got an email from a request, or I don't know what you want to call it, from Senator White, who chairs the committee on something or other. And we have created in statute the Connecticut River Commission. A couple of years ago, the administration said, well, they can compete for clean water grants the same as other entities, except this commission is established in statute. None of the others are. So we've created a structure in statute and then pulled away the funding and said, well, go out and compete just like every other entity that's been created. So the request to us is, we have this commission, it's created in statute, and we ought to fulfill the funding requirements for us to be part of this commission. And I think it includes New Hampshire, probably Massachusetts, Connecticut, I assume. So this is putting back the funding to support the work of this commission, which is broader than clean water, into the budget, and recognizing that we've created it and we need to fund it.
Yep.
So that's where that comes in. All right. Program development. And town bridges, that's just transportation related. And it was this bridge that I think wasn't moving forward, and they switched the money. So Stephanie, do you have more to add on that?
No, that was just what we had from Chris as the where money had to move in the transportation appropriation section. There's also movement in the one-time section, but this is the base. And so these were the only pieces that were moving in the base.
Okay, so that closes out the base.
Yeah, and so what you see on that general fund column, I didn't total the other columns because they're a mix of funds, so the total wouldn't mean much. But that you would be spending $2.2 million more than the House in the base of the general fund in FY22. And as you may recall, the House had set aside general fund unexpended money in a reserve. So you would be spending not into that, you would be bringing down the amount of that reserve by this 2.2, and it'll change a little bit when we get into the one-time section as well. But that's where you would be funding this differential. And that's where you land in terms of you're still in balance for the general fund. But you're spending in the net, and it's some of these are offsets like the reversion in legislature. So it's not all net spend up. It's a the spend might be higher, but the net impact to the general fund is this 2.2.
But I think that the sentiment of the committee was that we really wanted to put a priority on dealing with our service delivery structures, mental health, SSAs, doing something to address our pitiful level of reach up assistance, cash assistance to families. And obviously what we're doing in the court related parts are important. So I think hopefully this captures our discussions and we can move on.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
One
What's
more
the-
line from you. The reach up benefit per month is,
Right now, it's around 740 a month for a family of 3, a mother and 2 children.
that you could starve on that.
That's why I get on my state lady hat, because everybody's saying, they want to serve these families and get paid for services, but we haven't really done much to help parents meet their children's basic needs. So this to me is, it's been something that this committee in the past has really tried to make progress on. We did it with the Reach Ahead, with the childcare benefits, restoration of some of the SSI reduction. So I think that this committee has been very supportive, although certainly this is not a large amount of money to support families.
What I would say about the reach up population is they don't have lobbyists and they aren't a single issue group, so they get left behind.
Well, I would say the one group that is even further behind are our SSI AABD recipients. We haven't increased the state SUP to AABD, and no one I've heard mention that at all, except me. And so, but I'm going to move on because I feel like we've made some significant progress in key areas. So let's move to our second document, which
So that document, the second document is the language of the back of the bill, essentially document. It looks like it's 137 pages, it double spaced. And it's the third document, which is the summary of the general fund one time in the bill. That document, they kind of go together. And so it's the committee's preference. Would you like to just start walking through the language? We've highlighted places where we really want you to weigh in if it's been redrafted
Okay,
since
then
last week.
we need to move to document number 3.
And you want to go through the one times first?
No, the document number 3, the way Chrissy
Oh,
sent
yeah.
them out, is the language.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got the numbers backwards.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so if that, we'll start
I
walking through the
think that-
language.
I think we should do that next.
Yeah. And so that's the draft as of this morning. So the first several pages, the section A parts of the bill are the preamble to the bill, and there's no change in those. This is basically boilerplate language that's in every year. We did have a little bit different language last year because of the CRF money, but this is back to our normal budget approach in the A section of the bill. And so what we're really starting with is on page 6 of this document. And you're going to see lots of things struck out as we move through this document. Most of the major strikeouts are because we are pulling all that ARPA into what's going to be the G section of the bill. And that will be documents 4 and 5 that you get after we get done through documents 3 and 2 this morning. So you'll get another set that goes with just the ARPA categories and language.
And this, we had some discussion, the House had sort of done their bucketing, but what we're going to do, because there's been a great deal of emphasis on being able to see in one place where the ARPA money is being appropriated. So we're creating, although the administration has suggested we do an ARPA standalone budget, we're doing a clearly identified section in the big bill that appropriates the ARPA money. So we're having to delete the sections that the House did because we're creating a whole new standalone section.
So that's all gonna be in that 1100 section, right?
No, it's going to go into a G section, I think.
Yeah, B 1100 and
No, G.
G as in good.
G is in star.
okay.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest we just get through because all this is doing is deleting because it's being imported and reflected in a whole
Well,
standalone section.
Yeah, the B 1100 basically was that frame that this house set up, but you have actually set up your own frame in the back. And then B 1101 were the technology appropriations. Those are now in the back of the bill, or will be when we get to the language later.
Stephanie, what page are you on?
I'm now down toward the bottom of page 9.
Oh, I was already on page,
Yeah.
since they struck everything.
We did. I didn't know if you wanted to just touch on it, but we can keep going.
No, Stephanie, I think it'll be easier as
Okay.
long as the committee is comfortable that we've gone through and we have taken what is being deleted is being picked up somewhere else. So rather than going through the deletion and just trust us that that's been done, because I think it gets really confusing otherwise. So I'm going to suggest we get through that wholesale deletion there.
Okay, so let's scroll down to the bottom of page 14, top of page 15.
Yeah.
So B 1103 is the one-time appropriation out of the downtown transportation and related capital improvement fund of $5 million. That's mostly happening on page 15. There's just some technical corrections there. Other than that, there is no change to this section. Chris Roop is double checking something back and forth with finance and management right now on the underlying source of the $5 million. But when we resolve that, we may have a change, but we'll come back to that.
Senator Sears. So it's not changing anything. It's just
it was just how that subsection.
Something about village centers. There's one village center in Chittenden County and the rest of the state is an A.
I don't know within, so that have completed a comprehensive urban community area planning process. I'm sorry, I don't know the details of why A and the B and its subcomponents are separated.
Maybe because one is an MPO.
Yeah,
I don't know. Oh, it would be interesting to know why we have two.
It wouldn't be because
so clear,
Chittenden County-
it looks like the
we'll
one
find
in
out.
county is not part of the Better Connections program. It is
Right.
what it appears to be, but it's analogous. It's got a plan that's analogous to the Better Connections program. I think that's the distinction they're making.
Thank you.
And I know that we've had a number of even in the Northeast Kingdom, grants from Better Connection. So that is there. Well, if somebody wants to confirm it, who might be listening, I'm going to keep going, why there's the distinction between A and B, but I think probably Stephanie's given us the answer. So if it's not right, we'll hear, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the bottom of page 16, top of page 17. This is where we are making a change in the one-time transportation fund appropriations based on the recommendation of the Senate Transportation Committee. And so the words are mostly at the top of page 17.
We spent quite a bit of time on that, and Chris Roop came in on Friday, and that's just reflecting the decisions of the Senate Transportation Committee, which included, as you can see, 400,000 to move the New Haven train station, as well as other changes, and rather than and using 3 million to go to towns for class 2 highway projects and structured projects. So I'm going to suggest we move on, because that's just reflective, and we normally that's the recommendations that are in the T-bill as we're going to get it. So we're incorporating the fact that we don't have the T-bill yet. We're anticipating what we know what's in it and reflecting it here in the budget. All right, somehow there was a $3,600 fee or something that threw the T-bill into finance. So that's why we haven't got it yet. But we have to move the budget, so we're moving it.
The bottom of page 17, B1105 is struck out completely. Two things going on here. We got in the technical letter, the $10 million didn't need to be appropriated here because it was appropriated in the base of A&R out of the special fund. And then we moved the $11 million appropriation for brownfields into the back of the bill ARPA section. So this section is now deleted. And now we're on page 18 in B1106, the one-time general fund appropriations. And you can see that the appropriations in A-1 have not changed. Where we start to change is in number 3 at the bottom of the page. That's $500,000 to the Department of Health. That's part of the $10 million that was into the Environmental Contingency Fund. We just need to appropriate it directly to the Department of Health. So you'll actually see the Environmental Contingency Fund piece drop from 10 to 9.5. So it's a net neutral move. It just needs to be lodged in the right place.
But
Stephanie?
that's part of the 5 million, Phil, if that's what you're asking for testing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
4.5 will still be for testing, but $500,000 so 4.5 and 0.5 to the health department comes to the 5 million.
Yeah.
So this is just a first tranche that's going out.
Yeah, and this is
Or
the
not.
health department part of the testing and reporting part of it. So you'll still see when we get to A&R 4.5 out of the Environmental Contingency Fund for the testing piece.
Okay, got it.
So that and the 4.5 together give you the whole $5 million for PCBs.
Okay.
And then on page 19, several of the smaller items and some of the newer smaller items of one time are being put into the general fund as opposed to being lodged as miscellaneous smaller items that don't quite fit necessarily into the categories that you're using for the ARPA funds. So you did pass the unmerging of the market piece in, or I don't know if you've ever actually passed it, but finance was putting it on a bill. The House was putting it on a bill. It does come with a cost, the Green Mountain Care Board, that $32.5 million to the Green Mountain Care Board. Number 5, this is a request.
Do you mean $1,000? Okay.
$32,500. The Arts Council made a request. There is a separate line of funding for the Arts Council in the ARPA, in the federal line, but it has to come with match dollars, and we can't match it with other ARPA dollars. We have to match it with pure state dollars. So that 126,242 is the matching need for them to be able to draw down their share of the federal money that's available.
So what is the match rate on that? Because I know that was something important to economic development. So we have got two appropriations in. One is that digital support that
That's
and some
separate from, yeah.
grants.
Yeah.
And then we have this, and which is a match to draw down money. What's the match? 50/50, 90/10, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. Steve, I don't know if Steve's listening, if he remembers. I think it is less than 50/50.
Yeah, I do not know. I think it's less than 50/50. I'll check. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what we were trying to do is take the smaller appropriations and put them in here and keep the clearly and the larger appropriations that we're using ARPA fund. So this is our effort to better categorize the different revenue sources.
And the next three that are in here are the pieces that are related to studies that we have sort of addressed, pulled out of other bills. So the first one is related to the pension reform task force. That is the actual task force is running in another bill, but the $200,000 to fund the work of that task force is here in number 6. Number 7 is the $200,000 we talked about last Friday or Thursday on the childcare system work that will be contracted for. And number 8 is the $175,000 to the legislature for the task force on healthcare that we talked about on the committee bill that was S-120 and now is being turned into a combined committee bill coming out of Senate Health and Welfare. So that's what the 3 pieces here are.
Ask this question.
Yeah, Alice?
On 7, just the last line there. A study required by by legislation enacting during the 2022 session.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's wrong. 2021. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Same thing in number 8.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
We're in
Jane,
our 22 budget, but yes, Senator Ballin.
21 session.
sorry to interrupt, Jane. I just wanted to make sure that I know we talked quite a bit on Friday about the language around the
Mhm.
task force.
Yes.
And
I've actually sent that to Senator Lyons and Jen
Okay.
Carby so they can incorporate the language that we talked about in the bill before it comes out of committee. So it's already there. And I've let them know that the money is being taken care of in the budget. So it will be
Okay.
subject to appropriation, but it will also has rewritten what that funding is for.
okay, great. Thank you.
So that I have already sent, I did that yesterday, sent it to Senator Lyons and Jen Carby. And and there was the other piece about the benchmark plans that they had in their bill and we've got in the budget. And so we need to align, harmonize, whatever you want to call it, but that's
Okay.
been done. Okay. Other questions? We'll keep moving.
Number 9 is the same amount of money that the House had in the bill. They had it in ARPA funds. It's just being placed in the general fund one-time category here for the VSO, just to help them because they weren't able to have a season last season. 10 and 11 are also the same amount of dollars that the House had in the bill for racial equity, 180 to the Office of Racial Equity and 200 to HR for racial equity training. Those are being moved into the general fund as well.
And I
here.
think that's the 380 that was referred to in the health and welfare memo as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you can see what we've tried to do here in this section with these smaller appropriations.
Mhm.
And then same thing, 12 and 13, maintaining the, I can't remember if 12 was in the House bill. I think it was maintaining the 211 call center for $126,000. And then the $120,000, these are one-time in nature to make up for that swap that happened related to the AIDS HIV service organizations.
So we're
that-
agreeing with the House, we're just moving.
The source of funding.
Okay.
Oh,
So
and
the
then the
next
last one-
question is, what we had the request, and I don't remember do you remember
So-
how we funded it?
Steve remembered, I thought it was last spring, but it was actually last fall in the joint fiscal process around CRF. And it went through DCF and out to the donor milk program. And so that's who we would appropriate it to. And it was, I can't remember the dollar amount. It was either $10,000 or $15,000. I think it was $15,000. And JFC moved it as part of the reversion and new CRF last November.
So
in one
we
of those
had that was in the memo from, we've gone through, obviously, Health and Welfare had quite a long list of potential funding. On it was money for the food bank. And then there was the donor milk program. So the question, we have not made a decision about that 25,000. People have any thoughts?
I'm not big on it.
Hmm.
I'm
Well, I'm
not big
sure
on it.
Bobby must know something about it.
Well, this is,
Is it-
The phone was ringing, so I had
this,
to mute.
this is, well, that, I don't know if you want to phrase it quite that way, Senator Sears. This is breast milk,
Oh,
human
Okay.
breast milk.
It's
Sorry.
milk that,
thank you for that verification.
Uh-huh.
I believe the donor milk program is where the two biggest milk companies in Vermont get together a few times a year and they donate milk to the food shelf to give out to their, to their
No,
constituents.
I don't think so. I think this is
No.
breast milk.
This is
Yeah.
breast.
Yeah.
Well, this it doesn't have anything to do with that program then.
So Alice, what's your objection?
I'm who runs it?
I
That'd
think
be-
it's probably similar to like the diaper bank, but we make appropriations to state agencies. We don't earmark, in that, we don't make appropriations to
And-
So
Who runs?
Outside entity.
DCF. We did the appropriation through DCF, probably through the GA program or something. I mean, just as a grant out.
Okay.
And this,
So-
it'd be in the general fund list, so it wouldn't be like, it's not the complications of having a federal dollar go out to a small organization.
So this is to continue funding that was, as Steve did the research, we knew we'd given money before. This is this is a continuation of that funding.
Right.
But do people, all right,
So who does run the program?
I don't know who runs it. I think it's based in Essex.
um,
And
It's not worth spending a lot of time,
Is
but
the milk, is the breast milk available statewide?
yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So is the committee wanting to fund this item or not wanting to fund this item?
Yeah, all for
Yeah.
it.
I think people are saying, we funded it once. This is a continuation of a nutritional need. It's a very modest amount of money and we'll fund it on our general fund here. Some of their other ones, for example, on the list, and we can go back through them, but we don't have the money. They wanted, Health and Welfare had quite a long list in terms of more money for financial aid to for nursing and primary care shortage. They had a request that we received. The House considered it and did not fund it. And that was to raise Medicaid reimbursement for primary care to 105% of Medicare. We have a memo, the House considered it and did not want to raise the rate to the 105%. We had the same request submitted to us. I've sent out the response from the Commissioner of DEVA that is not in support of doing it now and why. So if we go back, we've gone through the Health and Welfare requests and that obviously the requests exceed our ability to fund. So I just want to remind people who might be listening that we did review that 7-page memo, and we've tried to accommodate as many of the requests and areas for consideration, which was on page 7. And and ultimately have had to make these decisions. So I'm going to close out the 25,000. And if our understanding of what the donor milk program is not correct, I am sure someone will give us an email or clarification. So let's move on to section C100.
These are more general fund one-time appropriations. They're just being made in FY21 instead of FY22. And so the first one is the $2 million, no change, just the name changed because we had the amendment to the underlying program that you'll see. And we talked about, Jen had drafted it on Friday as well. In number one. Number two is the $8,500 for information technology support at the Commission on Women. Number three is no longer in this part of the bill. You'll see it when we get to the ARPA part of the bill.
Are you talking about, it looks. Okay.
I'm at the
What
top
is-
of page
What
21.
is, on the top, but below 43 in parens, what is 43?
You know
The
what that is?
four is struck. The 4 is struck and the 3 is the new number. It's the strike through that's hard to see.
It's
just the numbering.
impossible to see.
Yeah, it's the nature of when you strike through a 4, they should make it a slash instead of a horizontal line.
I guess. Okay.
So no change in the $25,000 for the Vermont 250th anniversary celebration.
Oh, Senator Sears, pay attention to that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
put that on your list, Sears.
That's the only little thing I got, and it's going to the whole state.
The $40 million that's being struck in number 5, we will get to when we get to the G part of the bill. And it will still be general fund
Okay.
dollars there, but we'll show that there with the housing in comprehensive, all the housing pieces. And then number 4 is new. This is
All right,
also,
Senator Starr.
Yeah, see, put that on your list. I get 25, you get 50.
Well, I haven't even found it yet.
Well, just look on the page and look
Page
at the
21,
green.
number 4.
Page 21, number 4. It's the only thing that's not cut out.
We,
Well, yes, I don't know if Gus got to you, but this is to help farmers with technical help that have to apply this year because ag didn't get any money. So the farmers got to apply through ACCD if they want any help. And this is to help with technical assistance to doing the applications.
So this
I
was
think-
a request that came through our ag committee to make sure that our farmers, or frankly, could get help with, I would think, some of the working lands application as well.
Well, hopefully.
Jeez. All right, well, two PhDs and a CPA couldn't pull off an application, Bobby. I don't know what, maybe Gus is gonna be better.
Well, he did very well last time around.
So I'm going to, that came to us, it was a way of, we've had other help to certain groups to make sure that they're accessing any available funds, federal funds, and this is to give some resources to the agricultural sector for that purpose. So that gets into,
so at the top of page 22, we struck through C01, C101, the pension. This is the $150 million piece. It's been redrafted in subsection B, you see on page 22.
and I want the committee to pay attention to that because it was concerned that if we're reserving that much money, that that there be some language around the conditions under which these funds that are being reserved would be released. And Senator Sears, this is something that I know it's dear to your heart, so I want you to look at it.
I just, I'm sorry, but I just can't see putting 150 million aside right now. I
Well,
agree with
it's-
the governor.
It says that
I think we
it's-
should wait. Well, what does it say?
it says the money is being reserved, but it cannot be, it would be only made available for appropriation to accompany the structural reforms that are part of the long-term legislative initiatives to make the plans more sustainable. I think you had agreed that
Yep.
That,
That's
that, as long
exactly
as there
what-
was language.
Madam Chair, I couldn't have written it better
Okay. Thank you.
than whoever wrote that. But it encompasses my thoughts exactly. We should not be funding something and then allowing the legislature to kick the can down the road without doing anything in the ensuing 18 months or whatever we got left.
Well, I want to give credit where credit's due, and that was done yesterday afternoon. I might have changed a word or two, but that was joint fiscal staff, so that put that together. So I'm going to move on since that seems to be reflective of our discussions.
So if folks would scroll down to page 24, the final version of the utility ratepayer arrearage, $15 million starts halfway through page 24. And Maria Royal did some editing on this. And so if folks wanted to read through it, it's similar to versions that we've seen in the past, but tightened up.
And if you'll notice, we're using Corona relief funds. We still have some available. And this is to deal with the concern that the utilities have expressed regarding the arrearages that have been built up. So I think we had agreed that we would continue that assistance. Without it, those arrearages would translate, I've heard, as much as a 2% rate increase for all other customers. So that is taken
That
care
brings you
of.
to, that brings you to the top of page 26. And C108 is a new section.
Mhm.
And this is also out of CRF funding, not ARPA funding, but the funding that we dealt with last year and is available through the end. And this is to the legislature for prepping for coming back next session, but the work through the summer and fall that will be needed, and the increase in fee for space costs that we're experiencing now, we'll be experiencing, so.
And if you'll notice, it's referencing the Joint Legislative Management Committee, which already is starting work, and we have a report coming in, I think maybe tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
That
yeah.
will require some funding, and whether it's IT or fee for space, et cetera. So this money is being appropriated to support the recommendations of that plan once we to prepare for the 22 session. Okay. And I did let Senator White know their committee had been spending some time on, what it will take to restart the session. And I let her know that we were funding this and that we would be expecting the Joint Legislative Management Committee to take the lead. That's what it's in place. And there's already been some discussions around this already, and any work and further development would be under the aegis of that committee, which happens to be chaired by Senator Ballant. So Senator Ballant, you're happy you have some money to for the committee to.
Yes, I'm delighted. Thank you.
Okay.
I
feel like, there's that quote, "He who watches over Israel slumbers not nor sleeps." Well, I'm hoping that you're finding we haven't been slumbering or sleeping here.
No
We've tried
slumbering.
we've tried to remember everything, but I'm asking you to pay attention. If we have skipped something, please speak up. But it's been kind of a lot to keep track of. So let's go on to 109.
So 109 is the repeal of language that we put in budget adjustment and Act 154 last year about year-end closeout, because we're replacing it in C110 at the bottom with highlighted in yellow. And what this is saying is, as when we close out this year, current year, 2021, end of June, right now, it looks like we're running significantly ahead on revenues. That will change at the end of April because of visually it will change at the end of April. In practice, in reality, probably not as big a change because of the timing of the federal tax being bumped from April to May. And so our tax collections will look off through April. But what this sets up is at the end of 21, first at the top of page 27 is a contingent appropriation of $10 million for the conservation piece. The House had embedded this in the $40 million of housing, but you had chosen to do $40 million of pure housing, and we'll see that in the back of the bill, and do the $10 million of conservation items here. It's a contingent, so it's not an absolute yet, but it's a very, very high probability that this $10 million will be there in July when we close the year. And then in number 2, it just simply reserves the next $75 million of surplus general fund if it comes in the general fund, and you will deal with it when you are back here next session. That's all it does in number 2. And then in number 3, if we have more than $10 million in number 1 and more than $75 million in number 2, then the statute will run. And the statute is that 50% goes to the rainy day fund and 50% goes to the state employees OPEB fund. And so to the extent that we have more than $85 million of general fund surplus when we close the year, however much more than that 85 would simply flow on the underlying statutory designation of surplus.
And we did not want to let the statutory go in because the unknown at the end of the year is pretty fluid. And we felt that reserving it this way would give us the greatest flexibility and capability of addressing the future. And then we can distribute it at that point however we wish. So that's in light of the revenues and how they look right now. But as you know, the tax deadline has been pushed out to May 15th. So this is how we're doing the first 10, which we think pretty comfortable to support land conservation, and then reserving 75, and then the balance would flow the half and half that Stephanie said.
But isn't, I mean, our needs are all met anyways, I think so. This is a good way to, we wanted to raise the housing amount up, and it takes care of that if we have the money. And no, I think that's good.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going then, unless,
So we're done with the FY21 C section of the bill. We're moving into the D part, which is just the transfers and reversions before we get to the actual policy.
3 pages, please.
So
29.
I want you to come to page 29, halfway through page 29.
What happens is if I look away, my iPad freezes and goes out and I have to redo it.
oh,
If I don't touch it every 20 seconds, I got to change that setting.
I guess.
Anyhow,
Okay, so we're on 29, page 29 out of 137. So we'll keep going.
Yeah, I think we'll get a little faster once we get past this front part of the bill, but we'll find out. So these are the transfers across funds. The first group of them are from the general fund to various funds. So the general fund to the environmental contingency fund, what you see here is that $500,000 change, where it was $10 million, but $500,000 is now directly appropriated to Department of Health. And we'll see language later in the bill around the PCBs. The general fund to municipal energy revolving fund struck through. You decided not to fund that because of the money running to the towns. Number 2 is the Human Rights Commission Fund, $300,000. That's the same amount was in the House. It's just in a slightly different position. They had it in a sort of tacked on at the end. So we just moved it in line with the other general fund. And the next 3 are transfers from the general fund to the various funds, the Forest and Parks Fund, the Act 250 Permit Fund, and the Fire Prevention Special Fund. These are amounts that are the same as the governor recommended, same amounts recommended by the House. The difference here is we're doing it from the general fund to the various funds. The House had done them from ARPA funds to the funds. The governor had done them as general funds. And the reason we're doing them as general fund is they didn't quite fit well into your ARPA sort of framework in the back. And you have the general fund available essentially in FY22. So that's the reason they're moved here. But the dollar amounts and where they're going to are no change from the House or the governor recommend in 3, 4, and 5. And then there's no other changes in the fund pieces. Middle of page 30, that what we thought was a technical change in the downtown transportation fund. Chris Roop is running that to ground with the Commissioner of Finance and Management. We're just making sure that that's the correct correction.
It looks like we have one too many digits
Yeah.
somewhere.
That's a big change.
We had to make a change.
It's not 4 million.
Yeah, and we do the, in number 9, it struck through number 6, the Transportation Infrastructure Bond Fund transfer. We're always doing that a year and ahead. So we needed to push the year out for the debt service reserve piece here. We forgot to do that. We have to move that year every year. And then as we scroll several pages down to page 32, this is where you see the reversions coming out of the various legislative budgets that we talked about when we went through the base adds that into the legislative budget for the various positions.
So we're
So-
reverting it and then we're appropriating it.
Yep.
But Stephanie says that's the way we should do it. So who's going to argue with Stephanie?
Blame it on me.
I know.
No.
And so we are striking entirely section D103. We're not making fund-to-fund transfers from the ARPA coronavirus relief fund to various funds. We're going to only appropriate the ARPA dollars. In some cases, we're appropriating consistent in the manner of a fund when we get to the ARPA section of the bill. But we're not doing.
Stephanie, can you say that one more time from the beginning?
So we're not going to.
What you just said.
We're not going to make a transfer from the ARPA coronavirus state relief fund to another fund of the state. We're only going to directly appropriate an ARPA dollar. In some cases, we are going to appropriate those ARPA dollars to be in a manner consistent with what a special fund might do, like the Clean Water Board, or I'm trying to think. There's a few. We'll come across them.
Okay.
But technically, logistically, we're not going to move the dollars in the accounts of the state from the ARPA fund to another special fund. We're not going to commingle them. We're going to directly appropriate them and then direct how they're used. That's the logistical sort of approach that we're taking here.
Okay.
Okay. So that gets rid of fund transfers, and that takes us down to page 34.
34, and the $38 million number is highlighted, and that.
Yeah,
right
because we
now-
have to change it because we spend a bit more.
Yeah, and so right now I have you spending about $7.3 or $4 million more than the House. So this will probably come down to a rounded number of $30 million at the moment, unless you have other decisions that you make before we're done by the end of the day. And so now we're going into the sort of the E part of the bill, which is the language sections and the policy pieces that I often refer back to the base budget. And so we're going through the position pieces. There's really no change.
Wait a minute, Stephanie, you need to give us the page.
Okay, I'm on page 35, sorry. And these are the positions being created in the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
And the one piece I wanted to point out on page 35, it's not highlighted, but there, capital C, Secretary of State, 1 Elections Assistant Director. You had actually created that in a bill that you passed, an election bill that you passed, but I think it's better that you actually create the position here, and the House bill funded it from the HAVA funds. You had funded it from the more general Secretary of State funds when you passed your bill. It's better to actually fund it from the source because that's been identified in the House. And so I would leave this position here and leave the funding here. And when that election bill is conferenced or finalized, the position and funding should come out of that bill because it's covered here.
So in the end, we're taking it out of Secretary of State's budget rather than HAVA.
No, you want to do it out of HAVA because it can be done out of HAVA.
Well, that's what I thought. But I thought you didn't say that. Of course, we always want to use the HAVA money whenever we can.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is leave it here, fund it out of HAVA,
Okay.
and then take.
And
then
anyone
then
who's
be
listening,
silent for
HAVA
the
is
other
Help
bill.
America Vote Act.
Yeah.
HAVA is a special federal fund, and it's short for Help America Vote Act. It's a federal pot of money. So we're going to fund the position out of HAVA, create it here, and then,
Yeah.
and then,
And not deal with the position or the funding in that election bill is the flip side of this coin.
all right, who's going to tell whoever's doing those bills not to put the position or the money?
I can send Amarin a note. I believe she's the person on that. So
I think
can-
we better.
Okay,
Okay, just to let her know what we've done in the budget.
okay. Okay. Then as we scroll through, the positions that are struck through because you actually created them in H315. On the bottom of page 35. And then we keep going until page 37. And it's going to be several pages of strikeout. The reason we're striking these out is because the clean water revenue construct is now embedded in the G section of the bill, along with the clean water investment of ARPA funds. So we'll return to this in a simpler manner in the back of the bill.
Okay,
That gets us down to the bottom of page 39, top of page 40, where we struck out the language that the House had put in around fish and wildlife and liquor control body cameras. You had not funded the second phase of the fish and wildlife body cameras, and we had you striking this piece of language out. You leave the language in DOC later on in the bill, but this one we have you not agreeing with the House on this.
and Senator Sears, this was part of our discussion that we didn't
Right.
feel cameras for liquor and lottery made sense at this point.
Right.
And the funds are not in the budget to do the rest for fish and wildlife. So this section just didn't seem to have relevance. But we do have the money for the Department of Correction cameras.
Yep.
And you do have the policy in here later on the
Right.
DOC body cameras.
Yes, Alice?
Might we do that in the budget adjustment, or what are we thinking on that? For fish and wildlife, body cameras? Are we thinking about it at all for them anymore?
I thought we were thinking about it in the future, but the part of the problem is the governor's reorganization plan
Oh,
wasn't approved.
right.
And certainly if they were part of the Agency of Public Safety or whatever they were calling it, you would want them with body cameras. I think eventually you want fish and wildlife with body cameras because they do a lot of law enforcement, but it's been left out in the dark somewhere by the executive order. That's, I think, the reason, if I recall.
So it's something that we can pick up and finish purchasing. But this is just right now, they're kind of, as Senator Sears, that they've only had the money for a portion of them. This budget doesn't include all of them, something that we can request or think about in future legislation.
Okay.
I think many of us expected the governor's order to go through in reorganization of the agency. Because there was strong support in Senate government operations for it, but it never got out of the House government operations.
Well, the history on that is not exactly on that reorganization proposal has never had a lot of traction, though.
Yeah,
But
well,
it sort of fell between the cracks because of this. So it's still something out there to be addressed, I guess.
I had,
is the way.
but I, in talks with Senator White, I thought that her committee supported it. And we're going to work on it. But for whatever reason, House government operations didn't. And that's why we're left with not having them.
So that's why we took out the language. It's because of it didn't seem to have relevance at this point.
Okay.
Okay, now you're scrolling down to near the bottom or midway through the page 44. It's in the middle of the strikeouts for all the municipal revolving loan fund pieces, but there's a new, the one piece you're leaving in as a new section in E112 is the state energy management program. We allow them to charge time and operating costs for any technical assistance they provide to municipalities. So if they have uptake, they can actually come to an agreement with the municipality and charge for up to their time and cost. Right.
And that, when they set up the revolving loan fund, which we didn't say, why would you take out a loan when you've got 176 million coming out directly? But there's been suggestion that there's expertise in BGS to help municipalities, same as Efficiency Vermont, help schools, for example. And this simply recognizes that if a town wanted to utilize the expertise that we have in BGS, they could do so, and BGS could say to the town, you know, we'll do it for you, and here's what the cost would be, and they could get reimbursed for that time or their expertise. So rather than expertise to help them do a grant, it would be expertise to help them spend the money for that purpose that they're getting directly. And then, of course, we took the 10 million and used it. We didn't fund a revolving loan fund because we just didn't see the time. This was the time that a revolving loan fund was needed, 10 million relative to all the money flowing to the towns, and to set up a revolving loan fund, which was not what the administration proposed. That was something that came up in the House, but with all the funding going out, it just seemed like this is something that.
Well, the administration put their proposal out long before there was the ARPA funds.
Yeah, but then the House put it into a revolving loan fund, which the administration just had a $5 million grant. So,
Right.
Okay, let's keep going so that they can, if the towns want to use the expertise, this allows them to do so and to charge.
Then we're scrolling down into page 47, and now we're in the legislative sections. We do see the positions being created. There is toward the bottom of page 47, a technical correction to one of the CRF bills last year for the money that came to the legislature. The meat of this change is on page 48, where it just allows the monies, those CRF monies, to be just transferred across the various entities of the General Assembly via approval of the joint, the Secretary of Administration, Joint Fiscal, Joint Legislative Management Committee, and Commissioner of Finance and Management. It's the management of those CRF monies. Section 127 was just a holding place that the House had put into the bill, so that's coming out as a deleted section, or no, it's being replaced by the creation of the position in Joint Fiscal that Joint Legislative Management Committee approved a month or so ago. And then we go next to no changes, looking for the next yellow or green item. So now we go down to the bottom of page 52, and this is where the
We
language
skipped the
that-
police officer.
we created a position in the Sergeant at Arms as
Right.
well.
Yep.
That I think was in the House, was it?
Yes,
that-
I think so.
That-
Because
that
that
was-
had been approved
Yeah.
by the Legislative Management Committee.
But back in section E126.1, at the bottom in section E.
What
one,
page are you
two-
on, Bobby? What page?
Well, it's 47.
47.
47.
47.
The number one is $2 million in appropriations to the legislature for cost incurred during the 2020 session.
So see, this is amending previous legislation. So this is the CRF money that you appropriated last year to the legislature. You're not changing the dollar amount, you're just changing how the money can be distributed. So it's not a new appropriation. It's just a technical correction to an old appropriation.
Yeah,
So
Fine.
that's what's happening there.
yeah.
Now I'm down to the bottom of page 52. And as people scroll through, if there's any questions,
Well, I
feel
don't
free.
know. I thought we were gonna did we approve E-143?
E-143.
We aren't there yet.
I know you discussed it, but you didn't, I don't have you have any change there.
Okay.
What page is 143?
It's on page
Bottom
51.
of page
The modular
51,
pile.
top of page 52.
Senator Sears and I lost on that.
Yes, please don't torture us anymore. I'm begging for mercy on that one.
All right.
143.
At the bottom of page 52, section E207, this is a new section. This is language you have not seen before. This is the language that goes with the change of the state paid deputies. This is where this change in language starts. And this was drafted by Damien.
And I believe Senator Sears has reviewed it, and it reflects an October 1 effective date.
And that you'll see in our effective date part. These sections will all be effective on October 1, 2021.
I'm not sure if current practice fit the law, those with mental condition or psychiatric disability, because I think those were separate contracts is what's happened. They're not the state paid deputies anymore.
All
I
right, so
think that,
you're just talking about prisoners?
yeah,
Okay.
'cause I think the other group, and we can check with Damien, but I think the other group on the mental condition or psychiatric disability have been paid by DMH separate years. And it may just be that wasn't supposed to happen, by the way.
All right, I'm gonna set that aside so we can look at it. And have Damien, and I guess we need to be clear, maybe maybe they haven't been paying separately, maybe they've
Right,
been
because they've
all,
been paying, right, they've been paying the sheriff, the department, I believe, and the state has been paying a higher rate for that group than the prisoners.
well, we need to, Steve Klein is
Let's get some
listening, we need to get that clarified. I've been under the understanding that the state paid deputies were being paid for prisoner transport. And that mental health was paying separately for transport, as was DCF. But we need to confirm that.
Yeah.
Is that something John Campbell would know, or
I doubt it.
Or Annie will know.
Annie would know? Okay. So I'm going to keep that language open for a while till we get confirmation, Dick.
Yeah, but this
In
this
12
language clearly ends on, the change takes place on October 1st rather than July 1st. And that's the language in B and.
Okay. But we also need to make sure that we're not having some kind of an unintended impact on mental health. All right, let's hold that open and we'll keep going and hope. So that section takes us down to page 55. And there's nothing there. So we'll hold that language till we get confirmation. So Stephanie, our next one is
Our next one,
page 57,
yes, let me keep.
and that's the study committee, which we reviewed that language. It's just reflective of to look at fees
Yeah,
and
that's no change.
surcharges.
Yeah, that's no change from last week. I'm gonna go through, in this part of the bill, we're basically looking for the yellow pieces, because most of these should be things we've already covered last week. So I'm at the bottom of page 61, really on page 62. And this is these E234 sections are where we have crafted the policy pieces that were in S109, which didn't get voted out of this committee, but were presented by Senator Bray last week. I think it was last week. We've incorporated all those policy pieces into the E234 sections here in the bill. And then the appropriations pieces, which are now out of ARPA dollars, are all in the back of the bill. So these should look familiar to what was in S109. And these are effective on passage.
Okay, and this is exactly what we spent quite a bit of time on, and Senator Westman, we're relying on you.
Well, I'm reading.
What's
I
an
think it's-
MMTCO, Senator Westland?
Where are you? MMTCO.
That's in the introductory paragraph.
Yeah, if you don't know what that is, we can't move forward.
Yeah, well,
Senator Sears, that was cruel.
that was,
So all the appropriations are going in a different place, Stephanie?
Yes, they're ARPA related, so they'll be in the G part of the bill.
Mhm.
and once they go in the G part, do they get, how do they get distributed from that?
So because we're not going to make a transfer from the ARPA funds to the new energy savings fund that we're creating here, we are appropriating them directly as you had specified in that as the S109 had specified, but we're doing it sort of in a manner consistent with the intent of the energy savings fund that you're setting up here.
Okay, but
which
the
is
fund,
basically just a pass-through entity.
right? But the fund gets created.
The fund gets
Right.
created. I think it's a couple sections forward
That-
here.
Because if the fund doesn't get created, I have a lot to explain to
No,
So
fund
the
Senator.
gets
fund is
created.
getting created in anticipation of maybe future funding streams, which I think was the goal of the committee.
Yeah, I think that was the goal of the committee, and they wanted to be able to look for grant funds, so.
Right, and
Yeah.
the MMTCO is a measurement used by the Environmental Protection Agency for 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent.
Thank you, Senator Sears.
You've
Well,
made
I
our
can-
day.
Yeah, I want you to know, Senator, that
You've made our
You
day.
must
Thank
you must have Googled that, huh?
my God, you caught me, Senator.
Oh,
I thought
Or
I'd
did-
surprise everybody with my knowledge of environmental
Well,
law.
we are impressed. So
Yeah.
this takes the language, creates the fund, and then the ARPA money is in the G section. And I don't think we changed any language at all, did we, Stephanie?
No, we took it basically as it was drafted in S109 and brought it in, and it's effective on passage. Yep.
So it's basically importing the text of S109, and then
Yeah.
the money is in the other section.
Actually, the one piece that I think what's in E234.5 at the bottom of page 67, I think is a repeat with a piece that's later in the bill, because I think that's in the ACCD section about the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I'll double check that. I think we might have the same language in twice here, because the House actually did include this piece, just not in this section. They included it in the ACCD section. So we'll make sure it's only in once. I just caught that now.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but you can see section 30, Energy Savings Fund, established, managed, and administered by Department of Public Service to fund a variety of programs that will increase energy savings. So we didn't make any changes, so I'm gonna let it say we move on, unless, because I think we've taken the final product that came out of that committee.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Down to the bottom of page 68, there's a green piece further up in 68 that you've already seen, which is just tying the look at E911 to the
PEG
universal
study.
fund stuff and the PEG study. But on the bottom of page 68, I don't think we saw this one last week, but this is just moving the dates on the healthcare reform pieces that were requested by
Ina
AHS.
Backus. Yeah.
Yep. The 300.2 we talked about last week on the bottom of page 69. This is how we're paying for the delivery system reform piece with carry forward. That was
in health and
the memo.
welfare's memo as well.
Yeah. And then we move forward to page 71 and the language around the waiver amendment. So we're extend or renew Vermont's global commitment to health waiver and adding the language that was in the Senate and Health and Welfare Committee memo about flexibility and maximizing investment dollars.
And we had that language reviewed by Ina Backus at the agency, who's the head of healthcare reform, and she was fine with that language. So we've added it here. So that was language Health and Welfare had in their 7-page memo to us. Okay.
Page 73 onto page 74, you've seen this amendment as well before. That was just the change, also October 1st for the premium collection that will be done by the carriers in the new insurance year as opposed to.
It's finally happening. So C
Yep.
is being deleted because the carriers are collecting.
Yeah. And
Okay.
pages 74, 75, this is the replacement language on the $5 million to the designated agencies that you went over with Jen last week.
Mhm.
And as we move further through, lots of green struck through language for the replacement of the primary care doc piece of the scholarship program. And those changes that were worked through last week. There's no change from what was the version that you went over with Jen last week.
That's something that was proposed by the AHEC office and the Office of Primary Care at UVM. And I did float them by, and I think there was some, if the House had some, but it really wasn't as clear as they wanted. So this is a rewrite to make it very clear, and hopefully we've done it. So that's what we're seeing here, and we reviewed it last week. That gets us down to.
Now, the next change is several pages on. Page 86, we had already struck through the foster care reimbursement rate, look at a state study. We are keeping in the specialized childcare transportation that was in the House. And then the childcare, the ARPA childcare stabilization grants language is starting on page 89. And I have that dollar amount, which is 50% from Sarah Truckle. It's $14,666,000 and some change is the dollar amount that will go in as the 50% that's being appropriated out of that.
We round that a little bit
We can.
to 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So what is that amount again?
So it's $14,700,000 roughly.
Okay, all right.
And that's what we'll appropriate to DCF because of that 50% requirement. And what you see in A is of this appropriation where we're allocating the same amount of dollars, the $2.5 million that was in the child care bill for current and prospective early childhood provider scholarship program and allocated for early childhood student loan repayment, 1.8, and then also the $100,000 for the pre-apprenticeship program through the career and technical centers for early childhood education. So within that, a 2.6 allocation for the workforce piece. And then we have in B, the report, the collective plan coming back in September for the remainder of the funds, the next $14 million, $14.6 million, what it's including in there.
Okay, and this was a replacement for that study committee. It's basically saying to DCF, do what you normally, your practice normally is, and you need to consult with stakeholders. But we also want to make reference to the Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, because that was recognized as an area where childcare needs might need some special attention. So that's as reflective of our discussion around what that plan would include. And also, were we putting in, is that where the parent Head Start is? That's coming up next.
That's what I was going to ask.
Well, it's
So
coming up.
the
Rich.
last
It's right at the
sentence
end,
on page 90 is where we, as part of the plan, to the extent permissible, because these are federal ARPA dollars, the plan shall specifically address the fiscal impact of the pandemic on Head Start programs statewide.
Okay.
And we're hoping that can be addressed. It's hard to imagine a federal program serving the kids from our most needy families and somehow has been negatively impacted.
And the hole that's created is that 75% of their money comes from the Fed and 25% of it comes because these have been subsidy kids in there. And because of the way they do the student count in the 25%, that's where their hole is showed up.
And, if they have to do something to address it's their own rules of how they changed reimbursement that have created this problem for Head Start. So as part of the plan, they could perhaps change their reimbursement for those specific programs. I don't know, but that we wanted to put it in to say clearly the plan should address.
For everybody else, they gave them, they've had COVID relief money to help private childcare providers, but this
They
because the Head Starts couldn't close, they
got caught in a catch-22. Yeah,
they got caught in a catch-22.
So we think that there's time to really figure out, is this a way of addressing the need? If not, then we'll come back and budget adjustment. We think that that's sufficient time to figure out how to recognize and address the plight of our Head Start programs.
In sub C in this section, because we're appropriating the dollars, and this is the stabilization grants, distinct from the regular child development block grant, which will run on the regular CFDA number and doesn't need grant acceptance. We're accepting the grant here because we're appropriating the dollars. We're subjecting
I just want to make an announcement. I cannot go back. I have my document on my regular. I'm getting emails floating to me all constantly about certain things we should be doing. And I'm not logging out. I'm not getting out of my document to keep reading emails, and my iPhone doesn't sync anymore. So anybody who's sending me an email, I'm not reading them until we break at lunchtime. I'm just letting you know, because I cannot keep switching back and forth and keeping us moving through this document. So any more than you could keep interrupting me if I were sitting in a committee table. So I just want to let people know that I'm not reading emails immediately. They're going to have to wait because I can't keep switching back and forth between emails and the document. So I'm going to keep going.
Okay, so I see it. We do the grant acceptance. we subject it to appropriation. This is still the childcare stabilization. We do allow for excess receipts if it's consistent with that plan that's submitted in September, because Sarah Truckle, the CFO of DCF, said there's a possibility that they may need to seek excess receipts. So that's what's happening in C, is because we're appropriating the dollars, we should accept the grant. And that means it will not go through the grant acceptance process at JFC. So you relieved a little bit of work at JFC. The next parts of the budget, several strikeouts. This is all the emergency housing, where what was in the House is now being replaced by the pieces that were submitted as part of the new agreed upon, with the exception of, that 90-day piece, into the budget for the transition. And this for FY22 transition from the motel, wide open motel piece.
So what we're doing here is substituting the language as was proposed and reflective of the work group that got created. And so the old language that was in the House passed budget is not relevant at this point. And what we're doing is updating it with the language that is reflective of the agreed upon. And I think that, and this is just as we're doing it for fiscal year 2020, because there's the longer term work underway in terms of what we do in the long term relative to housing needs and the general assistance program. So I need to be clear, this is taking the language that was sent to us as a result of all the work that's been done. And except for that one area, we were told there is, it was all consensus driven.
And so the new language starts on page 96. And it's the language that was submitted to us. We did make a little, I think, a modification just to be clear about the currently convened task force, the task force that's been convened since March is what's going to do the continued work for the long term.
Until December.
Yeah, because this is all the FY22 transition year.
Yeah.
I'd like to just, does all this get us from motels to more permanent housing? And that's the goal, correct? I mean, that's the goal of this section.
The goal of this section is to get us through the transition to get to that long-term housing. Because what's happening is, as they buy up motels and as more motels open up, we have less placements. We're going to go from right now 2,000 placements in hotel to, they estimate by October 650 placements in hotels. So this is the plan to get to the place where we start to the more long-term stuff.
A number of communities have begun, and maybe this doesn't do it, or there's no study of this, but a number of communities have begun, not the least of which is Manchester. And I just noticed today a story that Berlin is also concerned. The security of those motels and providing deputy sheriffs and et cetera, and law enforcement is putting a strain on small town police departments. Is there this part of this transition? Does that include having more than, like, I think in Berlin, there's only 20 hours a week, which isn't much.
The plan was $41 million that they brought forward, and it included security services at the sites. But part of what we're putting in here is in the housing piece is 40 million for the development of housing. There's also the 12 million for more of the emergency development piece, a temporary housing, and not rely on the motel. So there is a nexus there, but this is to help fund that transition from the emergency assistance piece as we currently have done it to transition
Yes, can
out.
somebody check with Sean Brown or whomever that there's adequate money available to continue providing security, particularly in small towns where police departments are being overburdened by calls from these mobiles.
I can definitely.
Well, I don't mean you need to do, I mean, I just think before we do third reading of the bill, this question may come up on the floor, and
I can definitely do that. On Thursday, if you look at our agenda for Thursday for the Appropriations Committee, there's 3 documents on there that they brought in. One with the language, one a straight letter from Sean Brown, and then there's an outline in a document of the things that they are proposing, and
Okay.
there's a breakdown of the budgets there.
Thanks, Rich.
I think certainly, Senator Sears, you have identified a real problem where we've had this concentration of families. And there have been some unfortunate incidents. This is just sort of how to take us from where we are to phasing out that high rate of motel rooms until we can get to better capacity on the other side. So it's probably not going to address all the concerns or the unfortunate circumstances that some communities have, but this is the language around the housing and the study group. But we can see if the amount of security that's being proposed, what that looks like in that 41 million. But I remember there was a specific amount allocated for that.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to suggest we will accept the work of this committee as it's attempting to take us from housing everybody to respond to the public health issues associated with COVID to a step down, and really looking long term. What is the role of our general assistance program in providing emergency assistance, and to whom?
Yeah, I think that group did a lot of work.
Yeah, they
They included all the players.
So I'm going to, how far does this get us down here? We've got the work group.
We're into page 100 is, if you're accepting all the housing pieces, you're into page 100.
And you can see we put in yesterday, the working group convened in March of 2021. We wanted to reference that the group had been convened, and this is the group that we're recognizing as continuing the work in the housing arena. So this is to page 100, and then we're into Reach Up, and this was a proposal that came from Health and Welfare, and that was at the end of the year, if in fact in 2022 there were unexpended funds in the Reach Up appropriation, that there would be a one-time payment to the families once that amount of money, if any, was known. And that's what we talked about, and that's the language that would do that.
And then we pretty much scroll to page 107. We'll go past the pieces, the Community High School Vermont, where we drop it to 1 year, and the pieces that are part of the stipend change from directly to VSAC from the flexible pathways. But on page 107 is where the language is coming in about what we talked about, the $13.8 million of the normal cost of teachers OPEB being funded in the ed fund. So this is what you see happening in section E 515.1. How you should read through the structure of how that's being set up.
So in one, it's two that we're making the actuary of the normal cost.
Yeah.
One is the pay go, and that's still general fund.
Yes.
that's important. I mean, for people to understand what we're doing here. That right now it's just been paying for the actual cost of the benefit for people who are retired. And number two is basically saying the normal cost for people who are still working and yet to retire. We're setting up a mechanism so that there's the money is in a pot of money to underwrite the cost of that benefit. So that's.
So the general fund continues with the pay-go, and if you're retired, it's going to come out of the ed fund.
If
No,
you're
if
still
you're- if you're-
working.
What?
If you're working, the ed fund piece is going to come up and build the balance of the OPEB fund. The pay-go is going to pay the cost of currently retired people for their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
What
got it.
what is that estimated to be each year for the pay-go?
The pay-go is, I'll tell you very quickly what it is right now.
Yeah, we,
Pay-go amount for. is,
35?
uh,
Is that a
35 million, almost 35.1. Yep,
35 million?
yeah.
35.1.
Okay.
For people who are listening, the general fund contribution in 2022 is estimated to be $250 million. It's over 13% of our general fund revenues are going to fund state employees' pension, state employees' OPEB, teachers' pension. That's the underfunding piece, not the normal cost, which now is being paid and covered under the ed fund, and the teachers' OPEB, which is 35 million. So between the teachers' pension underfunding that we're picking up and the teachers' OPEB, $187 million out of the 250 are for those purposes. So that's what we're paying out of the general fund. So that's just a breakdown.
Just to finish out here, the how the normal cost is calculated is also in that subsection 2. And then in section 515.3 is where the treasurer is going to look at the feasibility of this is funded off the top of the ed fund, but the feasibility of moving normal cost expenses, which would be both the retirement and the OPEB, into the local education budgets. So so it would actually be lodged in the local education budget. It would still be in the ed fund. It would just be, instead of a separate line of normal cost, it would be, but that needs work.
It just is something to be looked at. There's been some discussion that for full understanding and transparency of the cost of, your school budget and your faculty, that it would make more sense to have those costs reflected as part of the operational cost of your school. Right now, they're not. They're funded entirely out of the ed fund, but there's no. But how much that is attributable to the different LEAs is really not known. So there's been some discussion that in fact, that kind of expenditure and cost should be clearly known, defined, and transparent as part of our K through 12 educational system expenditures. So that's just, it's not doing anything other than saying for the treasurer to examine that, and that there's been some suggestion that that would make sense for a full understanding of what that costs, because obviously it's the LEAs that are hiring, setting salaries, and creating these expenditure obligations.
Yeah.
Just to refresh
In all the years I served on the school board, we never talked about how much the state was putting into all these programs to get a real understanding of what our actual cost was. We never even talked about it.
Well, I think we're
But
trying
you
to get a
should.
better understanding. Alice, you had a comment?
wondering if Bobby was there in 1949, 48 or 49 when they changed everything for the state to pick it up.
I think he was.
Right. So at this,
Although, I have to say, 49 was very different. And Act 60 and how we're funding education now is so different.
Well, in the late 1940s, teachers, their salaries were terrible and they had no benefits, and the state went in to try to shore up a system.
Were you there too, Senator Westman?
No, but
He
no,
wasn't even born
I had
then.
three aunts that were all teaching them, and they schooled me on all of it all the way through.
Well, I think it's,
so right,
And my second grade teacher, who was my grandmother.
Yeah, your
Alice.
dad said you had to be tutored all the way through.
No, I'm gonna suggest we take Alice's question and then move on.
just so that it's clear, this is just for the treasurer to examine this at this point.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So
just
people,
the feasibility.
so the people out there understand that. Okay.
Well, I would hope that with our K through 12 investments, the reading of this would be quite straightforward, but
I think
one never
we-
knows.
I think
Not
we've
by
talked,
the third graders, though.
I think we've talked about this off and on since we started work on the budget.
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
So it's only looking at it. It's not requiring anything. It's just the feasibility of having a clear understanding in one place of what the cost to Vermont taxpayers, regardless of how it's funded, the cost of their local education agency.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to keep moving along.
Can I just butt in here for a second? Senator Sears. There's 650,000 in the transition plan for security. There's another $4 million for motel-based services, and the motels can also use part of that $4 million for security at their motels. So there's 600,000 for security directly, and then part of that $4 million they can use.
Thank you.
And hopefully not hopefully, but our big concern is that a lot of the hotels, in light of travel opening up, they're now saying, we don't want to make the rooms available now for this purpose. So that's
Right.
the additional challenge.
I mean,
There's been some confusion about my question about the sheriff's transport of those that are mentally ill. I wasn't looking for proper words. I was looking to whether or not the sheriffs actually have a separate contract with the Department of Mental Health to transport those who are mentally ill. And somehow the question I just see the responses from Katie and Damien, and they seem to be focused on the wording. It wasn't the wording, it's whether or not
It's the practice. It's the practice.
whether or not state paid deputies actually transport that group, or is that done through per diem,
Separate contract.
separate contract, or per diem
Well,
rates with DMH?
We'll, when we break for lunch, we'll get the practice piece straight with
Yeah,
them.
great. That's the only question. It's not
Yeah.
whether
Okay.
terminology was correct.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
So if we're through the OPEB piece, if we
Yep.
could scroll to 110, Senator Baruch, make sure we pick up all the pieces of the amendments in the VSC section. None of these are new. You went through them all last week, but we're just having a double check.
There is one where you've kept this is the bottom of page 110.
Well, I want to look at two, accessibility.
Okay.
We have not seen it since the last rewrite, so we want to make sure that we're all set on that.
Okay.
I think that you've done it, the home campus. I think your rewrite. Any other comments? People feel that that's provides the clarity that we were searching for?
It's aspirational, but it reflects some of the cautions of the chancellor and others who didn't want us to overpromise.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Um,
It reflects what we've been told the transfer, the goal of the transfer is.
Yeah,
So now you're down to the bottom of 110.
yeah, there, we kept the add and the edit. So it's now redundant. So it should eliminate after the word section, everything until the words and shall.
So you get rid of the phrase to achieve these goals and to accommodate the oversight, get rid of that phrase?
Yes, and so now it would say VSE shall meet the following requirements during the transformation and shall accommodate the oversight of the General Assembly in so doing.
Okay, because you've got oversight there twice, so you want to,
Right, and
delete-
by saying they shall meet the requirements, you don't need to say to achieve these goals.
yeah, okay,
So
So-
that middle clause goes away.
yeah, okay,
Does that make sense, Stephanie?
It does.
Okay.
yeah. All right, we can take care of that. Chrissy's listening, so she can delete that clause.
And on
And
page
then-
14, or 114, I'm sorry.
And then the others are just the ones that we had already agreed to in terms of overall campus size and that had been.
The 10-year sunset.
Yeah, and the relevant benchmarks and gotten us now to what page now?
114.
114, okay.
So what you see struck here through the college workforce pieces, that's because that'll be in the G section with the ARPA money. And then that brings us to 117, and this is mostly for Chrissy. We struck through a section that we should strike through, which is what looks like struck 605, regular VSAC section. Just the strike throughs must have gone on, that should not be struck through. We want to keep that in the bill.
Okay, so on page 117,
Yeah.
E605, VSAC
That
should
not have been struck through.
should still be maintained.
Can I,
Yeah.
for, going back to the
Okay.
state colleges, there was a concern expressed by the Rutland delegation regarding the name of Castleton, to make sure it's still somewhere in the name.
I-
Is that in
I
there
can
anywhere?
speak to that if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Okay, is
So-
that in the purview of this committee?
I
Well,
would say no, and I'll
okay.
just speak to what Dick is
Well, I wouldn't be
talking about.
surprised. I'm just bringing it up because I wouldn't be surprised to see an amendment on the floor.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
Okay.
there's been an attempt in Rutland around Castleton to preempt the discussions about what the system would be named. And so what they want is a promise in law that Castleton will go first in whatever the construct of the name is. But I mean, you couldn't get a better definition of cart before the horse if we promise them that Castleton will have their name featured. It means that the whole discussion of highlighting the unified name would in essence already be preempted. So I take their caution. They want to preserve their fundraising. They want to make sure the name of Castleton remains, but it's just too early in the process to promise that outcome.
Appreciate that. But I just wouldn't be surprised if there were an
Yep.
amendment on the floor.
Yeah.
I think we all got that letter feeling that they didn't want to lose their identity and what the implications would be.
Yeah.
I
And
have sympathy for that personally.
I do as well. And I think about NVU with Lyndon and Johnson. They had similar concerns. But if you're going to consolidate and sell to people a larger entity, you have to sell that larger entity. You can't pretend it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Okay.
that's a discussion for a later day, I think.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
Well, it won't be if somebody offers an amendment, but I think that
But I mean, at that point, my
I would
hope
think
would,
this is something that our education committee is going to have to weigh in on as well.
yeah, by a later day, I mean, we can have the discussion on the floor, but there too, I would argue that it should be a later day. Because those discussions of unification, how to rebrand, haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
So why we would, on the fly on the floor, determine the name is,
You wouldn't.
no, I don't think so.
Well, it's understandable why they
Why
don't
they
even
want-
want to have the discussion, but,
Yes,
okay. So it may come up. I think forewarned is forearmed on that
Yeah.
one.
and I'm happy to speak to it if it does.
Okay, and so 117, this is just simply the two pieces of the 41,250.
Yeah, that's just in its own new separate section under VSAC for the stipend
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
And that, then we scroll on down to, just so you can see on page 119, the PCB testing,
Yeah,
where
4.5.
4.5 from the environmental contingency fund for the PCB testing. And then the next place that we want to scroll to is on page 120, where there's a new section about reporting on ARPA funds in the transportation. So these are ARPA transportation dollars, not state dollars, but
And the reason we're putting that in is because we know that there's money, ARPA funds coming to transportation. Some of it's in public transit and might be other areas. So we're just saying we want to, we agree, we want to keep track of all this ARPA funding that's coming into state government. And so this is just to, it made no sense. Yesterday I said, maybe we should talk about pulling the ARPA funds that are in transportation and putting it in this one section, but it didn't lend itself well to do that. So instead we said, if you get it and you're using it, we want to report.
There's a typo, Stephanie.
sure.
So instead of rescue, it says resuke.
Hopefully editors would deal with that, but I'm surprised spell check didn't pick that up. 'Cause
I
don't
know.
think that's a real
It's in the
word.
header.
That's a
I know,
term
but
of
I
art.
like it. The resuke plan.
Uh-huh. We got rid of 915 because that isn't we're not doing town highway aid in the Senate version of the T-bill.
And then we
So-
make, and then the rest of this document is the Pay Act, second year. And we do make the technical correction to the Secretary of Human Services pay level.
A zero was missing, so he's only going to earn 15,000 a year
Perfect.
for running half of state government.
That's really sharpening your
This is-
pencil.
And this is pretty good timing. The document that was labeled document 2, which is a one-pager, simply summarizes all the general fund one time that we went through at the beginning of this document in one page. So you can see all the general fund one time on one page. But I'm amazed that we made it through that by noon.
I think everybody wants to, so then we'll be going through the ARPA section right after
After.
lunch.
Yep.
So I'm going to
So really,
suggest it's noon, and if we could, our goal was to take a half hour for lunch. If we could do that, it would just mean the less pressure we have for people who have commitments later on this afternoon. So I realize it's
Right.
kind of a hurried lunch, but
And we're gonna send out 2 more documents. One will be a multi-page, narrative document of the G back to the bill, and then a summary document that summarizes all the money on not several pages. So you can see the ARPA and its associated pieces in
Do you
one
want
place.
to stay signed in or sign out or what?
I would recommend you sign out and we come back live in a half an hour. So I would say
Okay.
sign out.
okay, so I'm going to recess the committee